long before anyone noticed it. The Galactic Council had been dealing with humans for many years, and during that time, they slowly became used to treating humanity as if they were a problem to manage. It did not start with anger. It started with small things, little rules, quiet restrictions, new limitations placed only on humans. At first, the humans tried to talk about it. They tried to explain, to reason, and to make the other species understand that these rules were unfair. But the council brushed it off every time. The other species saw humans as loud, emotional, and unpredictable. They told themselves that humans simply complained too much. They believed humanity always exaggerated things. Because of this attitude, each warning humanity gave was ignored. Every time humans said something would go wrong if the rules continued, the council dismissed it as human dramatics. And every time humanity tried to present solutions, the council looked the other way. It went on for years. Then something changed. It was too small to notice at first. Humans stopped speaking up in meetings. They stopped raising their hands, stopped arguing, stopped pushing for changes. They sat in their seats quietly, listening and taking notes. But they no longer fought back. They no longer corrected misinformation about their species. They no longer defended themselves. Most of the council took this as a victory. They thought, finally, the humans have learned to stay quiet. They believed. This silence meant acceptance. They believed humans had finally understood their place. Some representatives even joked about it in private. They said things like, "See? Humans only make noise. When they can't get their way, they fall. Silent like children." But those who knew humans better understood that something was very wrong. A small number of observer scientists, researchers, and cultural experts noticed the shift and sent private warnings to their leaders. They explained that when humans grow quiet, it is not a sign of peace, it is the opposite. It means something inside them has changed. It means they have reached a breaking point. When humans stop arguing, they are not surrendering. They are preparing. The silence is a sign of full withdrawal. Unfortunately, very few people listened to those warnings. The council believed silence meant softness. They believed quiet meant weakness. They had no idea that silence was humanity's way of stepping away from something before it turned into something worse. Humans have a strange habit. They give many warnings before they act. They talk, they argue, they explain, and they try to make things work. But once they stop talking, that is when everything truly begins. At this point, humans were still cooperating in the basic duties. They still showed up. They still did their jobs. Their fleet still protected neutral space. Their engineers still offered repairs. It was as if they were doing what was required, but with no personal involvement, no emotional investment, and no extra effort. The ambassador of one peaceful species described the feeling perfectly. He said, "Humans are here, but the humans are gone." He meant that physically, humans remained present, but emotionally, mentally, and socially, they had stepped back. Their voices were softer. Their expressions were unreadable. They answered as questions directly, but never added opinions. They followed rules, but no longer offered ideas. Their energy seemed faded, like a light dimming slowly. A few aliens tried to ask humans if everything was all right. The humans simply smiled politely and said everything was fine. And that polite smile, held for just a moment too long, sent chills to the ones who understood human behavior. Because when a human says, "Everything is fine," in that way, it means nothing is fine at all. Still, the council ignored all these small signs. To them, results mattered more than emotions. And the result they saw was simple. Humans had stopped fighting. So they thought they had finally gained control. They continued adding rules against humans, more limits on trade, more inspections, more restrictions on ship routes. They kept taking small things away, assuming humans would simply stay quiet forever. But humans noticed every single one. The warning signs became clearer. Human diplomats no longer greeted others with the usual warmth. Human officers no longer stayed after meetings to help others understand technical problems. Human scientists stopped sharing new discoveries openly. Their participation dropped little by little, like water leaking from a bucket that no one realized had cracked. Some alien officers joked among themselves that humans were being dramatic. They said the silence was just a phase. Some believed humans were just planning to negotiate for better deals by pretending to be upset. But this was not a negotiation. It was a turning point. A quiet human is not a human who is bargaining. A quiet human is one who has stopped trying. One incident made a few council members realize how serious things were becoming. A large interspecies meeting was called. One that involved urgent problems that required human assistance. Everyone expected the humans to lead the discussion, as they always did. But when the meeting began, the human representatives sat motionless. When it was their turn to speak, they simply said they had no comments. The shock in the room was immediate. Even those who disliked humanity felt the sudden weight of it. Humans always had comments. They always had ideas. They were known for talking too much, not too little. But in that moment, their silence felt heavy, cold. Final. One elder alien whispered to another, "They are not with us anymore." The other whispered back, "Then where are they?" Nobody had an answer. The truth was simple. Humans were pulling away. Not loudly, not angrily, not violently. Quietly, calmly, patiently. It was a kind of retreat that no one recognized because the galaxy had never seen humans step back like this before. Humans, for all their fire and passion, are deeply patient when they reach their limit. They do not explode, they withdraw. They do not shout, they fall silent. They do not fight, they walk away. And that is what was happening now. In the hallways of the council. Humans moved like shadows. They completed their tasks and then returned to their quarters. They no longer stayed to socialize. They no longer joined mixed species meals. They no longer joined discussions about strategy or future planning. Some species felt something was deeply wrong, but did not know how to name it. Others noticed the change only because they suddenly felt colder when humans were not around. Humans were often seen as emotional beings, full of warmth and life. But now that warmth had faded, leaving behind a strange emptiness that everyone felt but could not understand, a few diplomats approached the council and suggested holding a special meeting to address human concerns. But the council rejected the idea. They said humanity was being too sensitive. They believed humans would get over it. They insisted nothing serious was happening. They believed silence meant peace, but they were wrong. What they didn't realize was that when humans go silent, they are not surrendering. They are stepping out of the game entirely. They are leaving the room mentally long before their bodies follow. And in that quiet space, deep inside their minds, humans had already made a decision that would shake the entire galaxy. They were getting ready to walk away. Quietly, just like everything else humans did during that strange period. There was no announcement, no speech, no dramatic moment that signaled a big change. Humanity simply started stepping back from the Galactic Council in small, nearly invisible ways. But each small step, when added together, became something much larger. The first signs came from the human ambassadors. For years, humans had been known for staying late in council chambers, discussing problems with anyone who needed help. They were the ones who explained complicated political issues in simple words. They were the ones who tried to calm arguments between species. They were the ones who stayed behind even after the official meetings ended, working through details many others didn't want to bother with. But now, When a meeting ended, humans got up and left immediately. They didn't linger. They didn't stay to answer side questions. They didn't offer to help rewrite plans or adjust agreements. They simply gathered their things, nodded politely, and walked out of the room without it first. No one thought much of it. Some believed the humans were busy. Some thought maybe they had new tasks on Earth. Others assumed humans were trying to look more professional. Only a few sensed the truth, that the humans were quietly detaching themselves. Then it spread to the engineers. Human engineers were always hands-on. They worked on every major project across Council space. Hyperlanes, translation grids, medical systems, and even peacekeeping drones had some level of human influence. Humans were the kind who liked to fix things with their own hands, even when they were not asked. They were the ones you called when something broke in the middle of the night, because they would show up without hesitation. But suddenly, humans were no longer showing up. They attended official duties, yes, but anything extra vanished. If a mixed team project asked for help with recalibration, the humans simply replied that they were no longer authorized to support tasks outside their assigned work. If someone requested human oversight on a malfunctioning system, the humans politely redirected them to the proper department. The other species didn't understand. For years, humans had acted like the galaxy's unofficial repair team. Now they were acting like every other species, doing exactly what was required. Nothing more. This scared some people. One officer from another species said quietly to his friend, "Humans don't act like this unless they're done with us." His friend shrugged it off. Humans act emotional all the time. Give them a week. But the week passed. Then another. Then another. Human fleets also changed. Normally, human ships patrolled large areas of neutral space, keeping pirates away and protecting trade routes. Their patrol paths were longer than anyone else's. They took more risks. They responded faster. Even species that disliked humans secretly appreciated the safety humans provided. But then, reports came in that human fleets were pulling their patrol distances back slowly at first, and more obviously. Instead of patrolling shared borders, they began focusing only on human territories. Instead of responding to distress calls instantly, they waited to see if other fleets would respond first. When asked why they were reducing their presence, human commanders gave the same calm answer. "We are aligning our efforts with current council expectations." That sentence bothered many. It was too clean, too polite, too controlled. Humans did not normally speak in such smooth, official lines unless something deeper was hidden underneath. Even traders traveling through space began feeling the shift. They said human checkpoints were now colder, more distant. Before, human officers used to smile, joke, even offer snacks to travelers from other species. They made long journeys feel a little more human, no matter who was passing through. But now, those officers scanned documentation and waved ships through with barely a word. No jokes, no familiar warmth. Just silent, professional detachment. It felt unnatural. One trader even said, "When humans stop smiling, the whole galaxy feels colder." The biggest change came when humans stopped volunteering for council committees. These committees were the backbone of the Galaxy Law Review. Panels, scientific safety boards, engineering oversight groups, crisis management teams. Humans used to fill many of these positions, often pushing themselves beyond their limits. But now, humans declined every new invitation. They resigned from positions they once held. They told the council they were reprioritizing. No one knew what that meant. No one asked. They were too confused or too afraid to ask. The council tried to pretend everything was fine. They said humans were simply adjusting to new policies. They believed it was temporary. They thought humans would return to normal eventually. They were wrong. The withdrawal grew larger. Human Researchers who once shared breakthroughs openly now submitted only the bare minimum reports. Human translators who helped bridge cultural gaps between species suddenly stopped volunteering for special assignments. Human peacekeepers, usually the first to arrive at any conflict site, now waited for explicit orders before sending even a single ship. One quiet moment exposed just how far things had already gone. There was a massive gathering, a strategic planning conference held once every cycle. All major species sent their best diplomats, officers, and policy experts. Normally, humans would sit near the center, surrounded by others seeking advice or cooperation. But this time, the humans sat together, slightly off-center, speaking only among themselves. When someone tried to pull them into a discussion, the humans smiled politely and said they were not the correct group to address that issue. They looked like guests, not partners. The room felt it. Even those who disliked humans felt a strange discomfort. They didn't know if it was guilt, fear, or confusion. What they did know was that the humans were not behaving like humans. Biggest shock came when the Council prepared for a major joint mission, a stabilization operation in a troubled sector. Everyone expected humanity to lead it, as they always had. Humans had the strongest fleets, the clearest strategies, and the most experience. But the humans refused the leadership role. They didn't argue. They didn't express disappointment. They simply said, "Another species may take the lead. We will play a supporting role only." No one had ever heard humans speak like that. They always stepped forward. They always volunteered first. Even species who distrusted humans respected their willingness to take responsibility. So, when humans stepped back, the entire council felt the ground shift beneath them. Still, many tried to comfort themselves with excuses. Some said humans were tired. Some said humans were stressed. Some said humans were being dramatic again. They refused to believe humans had truly changed. But deep down, the fear grew. It grew when human teaching programs closed in council academies. It grew when human translation teams reduced their schedules. It grew when human diplomats stopped attending social events. It grew when human cultural centers across council space shut their doors one by one. Step by step, humans were pulling away, not with anger, not with threats, but with quiet, steady distance. Some species, especially the ones who understood human nature best, felt a rising panic. They tried to reach out privately. They visited human quarters. They tried to ask gentle questions. But the humans gave the same polite answers every time. "We're doing well. We're focusing on our own responsibilities. We appreciate your concern. It's nothing serious." All said with the same gentle expressions, the same calm tone, the same distant warmth. It was not the kind of coldness other species used. It was the human version, soft on the surface, empty underneath. It fooled no one who truly knew humans. The truth was simple. Humans were moving away from the council. Not physically, they still attended duties. But mentally, emotionally, and politically, they were leaving. They had given warnings for years through words. Now they were giving the final warning through silence and withdrawal. One senior observer from a different species wrote in his private report, "Humans are doing something we have never seen before. They are not preparing for war. They are preparing to stop helping." Many still ignored these warnings. They believed nothing serious would happen. They believed the galaxy didn't rely that much on humans. They believed the council was stronger than one species. But more and more people were starting to sense the truth. The galaxy had been leaning on humanity for so long that it had become invisible. Like gravity, you don't notice it until it's gone. And humanity was getting ready to step away fully, quietly, calmly, completely. And once they did, the galaxy would face the results. Quietly, just as everything else humans did during this strange time. The withdrawal that started with diplomats, engineers, and fleet commanders slowly spread to systems and operations that no one had realized depended so heavily on human involvement. At first, it was subtle. A system would glitch, a communication link would slow, a minor delay in repairs would appear. These small issues seemed accidental, easily explained by technical difficulties or staff shortages. But the problems grew steadily, until ignoring them was no longer possible. The Council started noticing that certain sectors were becoming unstable. Trade routes began to experience small but increasing delays. Ships carrying essential goods like food, water, and energy modules arrived late. Some transport corridors that had always been safe suddenly became dangerous, and pirate activity spiked in areas where human fleets had once patrolled. Other species scrambled to respond, but they lacked the coordination humans had silently provided. Humans had always been meticulous. Every system had a contingency plan. Every connection had a backup. Every fleet movement had a schedule. When humans withdrew, all of that knowledge left with them. Engineers from other species tried to fill the gaps, but they struggled. The human technology was highly sophisticated, designed with redundancy and foresight that only humans seemed to fully understand. It wasn't impossible to operate, but it was far more complicated than anyone else could manage without guidance. Entire grid networks for energy and transportation started to experience cascading failures. Ships were stranded in space for days because no one could figure out how to reroute power. Medical systems in remote colonies began to malfunction because the humans who had designed the maintenance protocols no longer responded to queries. The galaxy had always assumed humans would always be there to fix things, and now, step by step, that assumption proved fatal. Diplomacy also suffered. Humans had acted as mediators in conflicts across several species for decades. They had a unique ability to see multiple perspectives and translate complex emotions into simple, understandable terms. When humans stepped back, disputes escalated quickly. A minor disagreement over resources became a standoff. Arguments over trade routes escalated into threats. Past conflicts that had been resolved with human intervention resurfaced. Without humans, the Council had no one capable of diffusing these situations effectively. Their absence created a vacuum, and the galaxy felt it immediately. It was during one particularly tense week that the scale of the problem became impossible to ignore. One sector, rich in natural resources, relied on a joint human-alien system for processing and distribution. Without humans actively managing it, a series of errors occurred. Production lines halted, storage units overheated, and critical shipments were delayed. Other species tried to compensate, but their unfamiliarity with the systems created more problems than solutions. Within days, entire colonies in that sector faced shortages of water and energy. Panic spread, and the Council realized that human absence was no longer just a minor inconvenience. It was becoming a full-scale crisis. Meanwhile, human fleets continued to scale back quietly. Ships that had once patrolled neutral space were now positioned only near human territories. They no longer responded immediately to distress calls outside their borders, leaving other species scrambling to defend themselves. When questioned, human commanders explained simply that they were prioritizing strategic resources. They offered no further details and no apologies. Their tone was calm, their expression unreadable. It was not meant to provoke, but it was deeply unsettling. The Council tried to intervene. Meetings were held to discuss how to compensate for the loss of human expertise. Proposals ranged from retraining other species to creating new interspecies teams, but all attempts failed. Humans had always acted as the backbone, holding systems together quietly and efficiently. Without them, no one else could match their precision. Every time someone tried to step in, the results fell short. Systems that had run smoothly for decades suddenly began to crumble. Each failure reminded everyone of how much they had relied on humans without realizing it. One of the most significant shocks came when a critical energy grid, maintained primarily by human engineers, started to fail across several planets. Power fluctuations caused by the malfunction disrupted everyday life, halted industrial production, and even affected climate control systems in delicate colonies. Engineers from other species tried to intervene, but every solution they attempted required human knowledge they no longer had access to. Attempts to contact human specialists were met with polite refusals. Humans said they were focusing on their assigned territories and could not provide additional support. The Council, for the first time, began to feel powerless. The political consequences were just as severe. Humans had been deeply involved in crafting policies that ensured balance between species. They acted as stabilizers in tense negotiations, often preventing disputes from escalating into full-blown conflicts. When humans withdrew from policy-making committees, the delicate balance quickly unraveled. Minor disagreements that had been previously mediated by humans became major disputes. Trade disagreements turned into economic sanctions. Border disagreements escalated into blockades. Wars, small but dangerous, began to emerge in regions where humans had once been present to prevent them. Some species started blaming each other for these problems, completely unaware that the real cause was the absence of humans. Tensions rose. Alliances began to fracture. The very fabric of interstellar cooperation that humans had helped maintain for decades began to show cracks. The Council, which had long relied on human participation as a stabilizing force, found itself scrambling for solutions it did not have. Every failure served as a reminder of how humans had quietly held everything together. The galaxy had been leaning on them without knowing it. It was only in their absence that the scale of their influence became visible. For years, species had treated humans as unpredictable or even unnecessary, but now they could no longer deny the truth. Humanity's patience and consistent effort had kept entire systems functioning. Without it, chaos spread like a slow but unstoppable fire. The Council tried to reach humans, but their attempts were largely ignored. Human representatives responded politely, but always with a focus on boundaries. They had no interest in taking on extra responsibilities, even when the galaxy faced crisis. Their calm detachment was frustrating to some, frightening to others. The message was clear. Humans would help only in their own territories and for their own purposes. Beyond that, the galaxy was on its own dot. It was the first time in living memory that the Council had felt so powerless. Species that had always assumed dominance suddenly realized they were vulnerable. The systems they thought were stable were failing. The networks they trusted were breaking down. The trade routes they relied on were now dangerous. And all of it was because humans, the ones they had underestimated and dismissed, had quietly stepped back. Even the media across the galaxy began to take notice. News outlets reported shortages, delays, and conflicts. Analysts attempted to explain the failures as systemic issues, but those who knew the truth understood something else entirely. Humans were intentionally reducing their involvement. No one could predict what humans might do next, and that uncertainty was causing widespread anxiety. Throughout all of this, humans themselves did not act with aggression or anger. They did not threaten or attack. They did not make demands or issue ultimatums. They simply withdrew their energy, focus, and expertise. They worked where they were needed and chose not to work where they were not. Their actions were calm, deliberate, and unyielding. It was a quiet, devastating power, the kind of influence that didn't make noise, but whose absence made every system, every colony, every negotiation tremble. Some leaders finally began to understand what had been happening all along. The silence and withdrawal that had seemed harmless were in fact the clearest warning humans could give. When humans stop pushing, when they stop speaking, when they stop offering guidance, it means they are done. And once they were done, the galaxy would feel the consequences everywhere. Yet even in the face of growing chaos, humans did not gloat. They did not act vengefully. They were not cruel. They simply followed their own priorities, tending to their territories and systems, keeping what mattered safe and secure. Everything else they left to unfold naturally. It was as if they had given the galaxy one final lesson. Stability and order require effort, patience and care, and if those willing to provide it are ignored, the consequences are unavoidable. By the end of this period, the Council and the other species had no illusions. The quiet withdrawal of humans was not temporary. It was a turning point. The galaxy had taken humans for granted for too long, and now the results of that oversight were spreading in real time. Each failure, each delay, each conflict traced back to one truth. Humanity's patience had limits, and those limits had been reached. The question now was not if things would fail, but how badly they would fail, and how long it would take the galaxy to realize that humans had been the unseen force holding it together all along, and for humans, nothing had changed. They continued their work calmly, silently, efficiently. They were not worried. They were not. By the time the Council began to fully realize the scale of the problem, it was already too late to act as they normally would. The quiet withdrawal of humans had created cracks that were now widening faster than anyone could repair. For decades, the galaxy had leaned on human expertise, judgment, and patience without even realizing how much they relied on it. The Council had treated humans as one species among many, assuming that their absence would be inconvenient but manageable. They were wrong. Desperation spread quickly. Council members tried to call emergency meetings, but human representatives attended only when required, and even then they spoke in short, polite statements that revealed nothing of their inner thoughts or intentions. The humans had always been excellent mediators, capable of calming the most volatile disputes with a few words or actions. Now, they refused to act as mediators. They refused to take leadership in any crisis outside their territories. They refused to intervene in disputes that had spiraled dangerously out of control. When a border conflict erupted between two species over a contested mining zone, the Council expected humans to step in, as they had countless times before. Instead, human representatives made it clear that their involvement would be limited. "We will not lead or enforce resolutions in this matter," they said calmly. "We will provide support only within human territories and resources." The words were not threatening, not even dismissive. They were simply firm, and yet the impact was immediate. Without human guidance, the two species escalated their conflict faster than the Council could respond. A situation that might have been contained became chaotic in hours. The Council tried to pressure humans to reconsider. Envoys traveled to human-controlled sectors, carrying urgent requests, desperate pleas, and even offers of concessions. Every message was met with the same calm, unwavering response. Humans listened politely, acknowledged the concerns, and then politely declined. Their tone carried no anger, no fear, no uncertainty. It was simply the clear message that they were stepping back, and that the galaxy would need to face the consequences. This calm refusal terrified many. Humans had the power to act decisively when needed, but they were choosing not to act. They had the fleets, the technology, the knowledge, and the patience to intervene. And yet they withheld themselves. That quiet restraint, that absence of action, was more powerful than any weapon the galaxy had ever seen. Systems faltered, disputes escalated, and the Council realized, too late, that humans were not punishing them. They were simply letting nature take its course. The ripple effects were everywhere. Trade routes that humans had maintained with precision began to collapse. Without their involvement, the transportation of critical goods slowed dramatically. Essential supplies were delayed or misrouted. Colonies dependent on regular deliveries of food, water, and energy modules faced shortages. Industrial systems that relied on human engineering expertise failed at alarming rates. Even communication networks began to falter, leaving entire sectors isolated for days at a time. Every failure reminded the galaxy of something they had long ignored. Humans had been the silent glue holding everything together. Council meetings, once orderly and productive, became chaotic. Representatives argued, blamed one another, and accused each other of incompetence. Minor disputes escalated into threats, and old rivalries resurfaced. Humans had always been the steady hand, preventing conflicts from spiraling out of control. Now, without them, the discussions devolved into shouting matches and endless debates with no resolution in sight. The absence of human guidance revealed just how fragile interstellar cooperation really was. One particularly dire situation arose in a remote sector where a vital energy grid failed. The grid had been designed and maintained primarily by humans, and when it malfunctioned, other species were unable to stabilize it. Power shortages affected thousands of colonies, shutting down life support systems, hospitals, and food distribution networks. Engineers from other species tried to intervene, but their knowledge of the human systems was insufficient. Attempts to reach human specialists were met with polite refusals. "We are focusing on our assigned territories," the humans said. "We cannot provide additional support." The council watched in disbelief as the very systems they had taken for granted began to collapse. Panic began to spread across the galaxy. The council tried to coordinate emergency measures, but without human involvement, every solution faltered. Trade caravans became easy targets for pirates. Border disputes turned violent. Infrastructure that had always run smoothly started to fail catastrophically. The galaxy, which had long believed it was stable and self-sufficient, discovered that it had been relying on humanity in ways no one had truly understood, that it was not just systems that were failing. Morale began to drop across the council and among the species. People grew anxious, unsure of how to respond. The absence of humans had created a vacuum that could not be filled by anyone else. Humans had not only been experts and mediators, they had been leaders in subtle ways, their quiet presence providing confidence and stability. Without them, everyone felt vulnerable and exposed. Even the most capable leaders found themselves paralyzed by uncertainty, unable to act with the same efficiency humans once had done in private. Some council members admitted their fear. "We have taken them for granted for too long," one whispered to a colleague. "We relied on them without realizing it, and now it is too late to recover." Others refused to believe it. They insisted that humans would eventually step back in if the situation became dire enough. But the humans themselves had made it clear. They were done intervening beyond their own territories. They had given all the warnings they could, and they passed through words, advice, and cooperation. Now, they were giving the final warning through inaction. Meanwhile, humans were calm, focused, and unbothered. They continued to maintain their own systems, their own colonies, their own fleets. They did not act recklessly or aggressively. They did not punish the galaxy. They simply prioritized their responsibilities and allowed everything else to unfold naturally. That restraint, that patience, and that quiet focus were perhaps the most unsettling aspect of all. The galaxy had always feared human aggression, but now it realized that human withdrawal could be just as powerful. This realization slowly began to dawn on the council. They understood that humans had been holding the galaxy together quietly for decades, preventing crises that no one else had the foresight to anticipate. Every success, every stable system, every peaceful negotiation had been influenced, often directly, by human effort. And now that effort had been withdrawn, intentionally and deliberately, the galaxy was facing the consequences not because humans wanted revenge, but because they had stopped doing what no one else could replace. Even media outlets across the galaxy picked up on the changes. News reports detailed system failures, trade delays, and conflicts that were suddenly escalating. Analysts speculated about causes, but only a few recognized the truth. It was not technology or politics alone that had failed. It was the absence of humans' steady hand and careful attention. Without them, the systems had grown fragile, and the consequences were spreading faster than anyone could predict. The Council, for the first time in its long history, felt powerless. They tried to call humans back, to persuade them to intervene, to offer rewards and assurances. Each attempt was met with polite, unwavering refusals. Humans had drawn clear boundaries. They would focus only on their territories and assigned responsibilities. Beyond that, the galaxy would have to manage on its own. There was no anger, no malice, no threat. Just calm, deliberate withdrawal. It was a lesson that no one would forget. Humans had always been underestimated, dismissed, or treated as one species among many. The galaxy had taken for granted that they would always be present, always willing to help, always patient and forgiving. But patience has a limit. Generosity has a limit. Effort that is ignored and undervalued will eventually stop. Humans had reached that point quietly, without fanfare or drama. And in doing so, they had taught the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. As failures continued to mount, the Council began to understand that humans were not simply being difficult or taking a break. Humans were showing, in the clearest way possible, what happens when those who hold systems together are no longer allowed to do so. The galaxy had assumed that humans would always be there to support, to stabilize, and to protect. Now it had to face the truth. Stability requires those who are willing and able to maintain it, and if they are ignored, the consequences are inevitable. Humans, meanwhile, remained calm. They did not celebrate the chaos. They did not intervene to prevent it. They continued their work quietly, deliberately, and efficiently within their own territories. Their patience had been exhausted, but their wisdom remained. They had given all the warnings they could give, and now they allowed the results to unfold naturally. That quiet confidence, that unwavering calm, was perhaps the most powerful force in the galaxy. It was a power no one had recognized until it was too late. And so, the galaxy began to face the consequences of its own neglect. Systems failed, disputes escalated, and the Council finally understood the true extent of human influence. It was a realization that came too late to prevent the chaos. The final part of the human withdrawal began to reveal the full consequences across the galaxy. By this point, it was impossible to ignore that the absence of humans had created more than small disruptions. It had created a vacuum that no other species could fill. Every system, every network, every agreement that humans had helped maintain for decades began to strain under the pressure of neglect. The Council had spent years underestimating humans, believing their patience and dedication were infinite. They were now learning, in the hardest possible way, that it was not. Trade routes that had once been efficient and secure were now dangerous and unpredictable. Ships carrying essential goods were delayed or lost entirely. Colonies that depended on regular deliveries of food, medicine, and energy modules faced shortages. And without human coordination, no other species could step in fast enough. The small errors that had begun months ago had now grown into full-scale crises. Panic spread among populations that had never experienced such instability, and the Council struggled to keep order as complaints and emergencies grew. Political tensions soared to levels the galaxy had not seen in decades. Minor disagreements over borders, resources, or trade, which humans would have mediated without fanfare, now escalated into serious confrontations. Some species resorted to blockades or aggressive posturing, thinking this was the only way to secure what they needed. Old rivalries reignited because there was no human presence to prevent them from flaring into conflict. Meetings of the council became loud, chaotic, and unproductive, with arguments taking precedence over solutions. It was the first time many leaders realized how central humans had been to stability. Yet humans themselves remained calm. They did not exploit the chaos, nor did they intervene to stop it. Their fleets stayed within human territories. Their engineers focused on human projects, and their diplomats attended only required meetings. When approached for assistance, they responded with polite, firm boundaries. "We will focus on our own systems," they said. "Outside of that, you must find your own solutions." There was no anger, no threat, no malice. There was only quiet, deliberate detachment, and it was more powerful than any weapon in the galaxy. The Council attempted one last time to bring humans back into the fold. Envoys traveled to human territories with urgent requests, promises, and even offers of resources or privileges. Each approach was met with the same response. Humans listened politely, acknowledged the concerns, and then refused. They had given all the warnings they could give through dialogue, through efforts, and through patience. Now they were giving the final warning. If your systems cannot function without our care, they must fail without it. It was not vengeance, it was cause and effect. And the galaxy was beginning to understand. Infrastructure failures multiplied. Energy grids, medical networks, and transportation corridors, all once meticulously maintained with human oversight, now faltered. Colonies experienced rolling power shortages, communication blackouts, and supply chain disruptions. Industrial production slowed or stopped entirely. Even research projects across the galaxy ground to a halt because human expertise was missing. Those who had relied on humans for guidance found themselves unable to maintain systems on their own. Chaos was spreading quietly but relentlessly, and the consequences were visible to all. The Council began to panic. They realized that humans had never been just one species among many. Humans had been the silent backbone, stabilizing a complex network of interdependent systems. Their patience, their expertise, and their willingness to act quietly behind the scenes had kept the galaxy functional. Without them, all the cracks that had been ignored for decades were now turning into fractures. The realization hit hard. Humanity's absence was not a temporary inconvenience. It was a complete systemic failure waiting to unfold. Despite the chaos, humans maintained their calm efficiency. Their territories were secure, their fleets were organized, and their systems continued to function flawlessly. They were not afraid or angry. They were simply focused on their responsibilities. Humans had always believed in careful planning, patience, and the steady application of effort. And now, for the first time, they were allowing the galaxy to experience the consequences of taking that effort for granted. Media outlets across the galaxy reported on the failures, often misunderstanding the true cause. Analysts suggested systemic weaknesses, lack of foresight, or poor leadership as explanations. Only a few observers connected the dots. They understood that humans were not absent by accident. They were absent by choice. They were allowing the galaxy to experience, in real time, what happens when the ones who hold everything together are ignored. Their absence was teaching a lesson no lecture could convey. Some species began to understand, too late, that human patience had limits. It had been tested repeatedly over decades, through restrictions, dismissals, and disregard. Humans had responded with reason, compromise, and cooperation every time. When their words were ignored and their guidance undervalued, they had gradually withdrawn. Their silence, calmness, and detachment were signs, not threats. Now, the consequences were becoming impossible to ignore. In many sectors, species scrambled to maintain order, but without human oversight, efforts often failed or caused unintended problems. Trade disputes escalated into standoffs. Resource shortages caused conflicts that no mediator could calm. Transport networks collapsed under pressure, and colonies struggled to survive. The galaxy, which had long assumed stability, discovered its fragility. Humanity's quiet withdrawal had revealed a truth no one could ignore. Systems, relationships, and peace do not maintain themselves. They require effort, attention, and care. And the humans had been providing it all along. The Council finally began to understand the human lesson, although at a high cost. They realized that dismissing, ignoring, or underestimating one species, no matter how patient or cooperative, can have consequences that ripple across an entire galaxy. Humans had been quiet, invisible, patient, and efficient, but their withdrawal was proof that even the strongest patience has a limit. The galaxy would feel the results until it learned that lesson. Interestingly, despite the growing crisis, humans did not intervene to fix everything. They focused only on what belonged to them, their territories and projects, and allowed the rest to unfold naturally. They did not gloat, they did not punish, and they did not seek revenge. Their quiet restraint was a profound statement. The galaxy had been warned repeatedly, through words, guidance, and cooperation. When the warnings were ignored, it was time to experience the consequences. The most striking aspect of this withdrawal was not destruction or chaos, it was absence. Humans had not attacked, invaded, or imposed their will. They had simply stopped holding everything together. And in that absence, the galaxy began to unravel. Systems, agreements, trade routes, and diplomatic relationships, everything humans had helped stabilize now faltered. The absence itself became the most powerful force, shaping events more profoundly than any military action could have done. Over time, the Council realized that human patience had been a gift they had misunderstood. Every system that had functioned smoothly, every dispute that had been resolved quietly, every colony that had survived crises had relied on the humans' steady care. The failures spreading now were not failures of skill or intelligence alone. They were failures of attention and dedication. Humans had been providing both for decades, and now, having been ignored, they no longer would. The galaxy faced the stark truth. Humans had walked away quietly, and the consequences were vast. Infrastructure failures, trade disruptions, political crises, and social unrest were all direct results of human absence. Every species was beginning to understand that the calm, polite, and patient humans had been the most powerful force in maintaining order. The lesson was clear. Do not underestimate those who quietly hold the world together. Their absence speaks louder than any words ever could, and humans, in their territories, continued to act with calm efficiency. Their fleets were organized. Their engineers were working. Their diplomats were polite but firm. They had given the galaxy decades of guidance, warnings, and help. Now, they had allowed the consequences to unfold naturally. There was no drama, no emotion, no revenge. Just quiet strength, patience, and resilience. And it was a lesson the galaxy would never forget. The final result was undeniable. Humans had shown, without violence, without threats, without aggression, that their presence was not a privilege to be ignored. It was a responsibility that came with immense value. When that value was dismissed, when their patience was taken for granted, the galaxy had no choice but to face the results. Humans had walked away quietly, and in that silence, they had changed the course of the galaxy forever.